So, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you're based in the world. My name is Gabriele Romagnoli. I'm here, head of community at ShapesXR, and I'm really happy to have here today with me Horacio Torrendel from Treeview to discuss, as we promised, about the challenges and learnings that they have got from creating an app called InViewer for the Vision Pro. So before I hand over the floor to Horacio, I want to say a couple words because he's the CEO at Treeview, that is a high-end boutique development studio that has been working for over 8 years in AR VR and is currently ranked as the #1 AR VR development team in LATAM. Today, we will talk indeed about how they develop InViewer for Vision Pro. It is a spatial STEM simulation library and their experience and learning when developing the spatial app, especially for mixed reality. So, Horacio, it is a real pleasure to have you here with us.
Thanks, Gabriele, for the invite. Looking forward to this conversation.
Nice. And while we wait for people to jump in and we can get the conversation, I'm curious actually for everybody, where are you guys tuning in? Because now it doesn't happen, honestly, that often that we got people from South America. So I'm really stoked to do that and also maybe learn a little bit about how it's the ecosystem there. So I think that is also a very good point. And I always say this, I encourage everybody to ask questions because you don't get very often the opportunity to ask direct questions. It could be about your own challenges. So please chip in with your own question. Now, so why don't we start maybe just without again, when people start getting in, with a bit of an introduction. What you tell us about you and Treeview?
Perfect. So Treeview, like you mentioned, we're a boutique development studio that specializes working with enterprise clients. So basically, we help enterprise clients drive innovation in the XR space by providing them a full suite of services to develop internal solutions and software in their companies. So that's what we're mainly working, our main focus. And we are a LATAM-based organization. So I am currently tuning in from Uruguay, which is a little country between Brazil and Argentina, and we have team members spread out around all the region. So we have team members in Argentina, about half our team is in Uruguay, we have team members in Mexico, and we work primarily with worldwide clients, mainly in the US and in Europe, but we also work in the Middle East and in the South Pacific, in Australia and Singapore. So yeah, fully remote, and we are excited to kind of like leverage remote tools also. Like we try to innovate in how we can maintain a strong culture, a strong team, in a fully remote setting that we've been fully remote since 2020. So that's a quick summary about where we are now, where we come from. So we've been in the space for about 8 years, so like 2015, 2016. We come from the DK2 generation. So this is way back in the day. And so I personally started doing some freelance work for DK2. And then that started growing. We did a lot of work in the Gear VR generation, a lot of work with HoloLens 1, which we're lucky to get that hardware and start doing software for that. We started growing from little projects to startups. We worked with a lot of big startups in the 2017, 2018, 2019 era. That started growing. We got our first large client, which was the University of Alberta, that we developed their AR platform for education. And then that started growing, and now we're working with some of the largest clients in the world. So that's a summary of the journey.
Exciting. And I think that one of the reason, and so again, everybody tuning in, tell us where you are from. So Horacio is from Uruguay. I am based in the Netherlands. But where are you from, right? Where are you actually listening from? We actually got to know each other because you started using ShapesXR for your part of your design process. So maybe for anybody that doesn't know about Shapes is a design and prototyping tool for XR teams, and it allows to start creating spatially in 3D without code. So start to understand how the UI works, how 3D element works in mixed reality, build interactive prototypes. So I think that this is why we connected, and more specifically, because you started using that for InViewer, that is this STEM library app, right? I've known you because I think that one thing I especially like is the attention of Treeview to design. You also created a blog was for a Newton's Room. That is another educational experience. Again, that uses physics. You can tell us probably more about it, but it uses physics for in the mixed reality environment. So teaches how dynamics, um, how body moves in space, right? So one question that I have curious is like, how do you operate as a studio? So was there a reason why you decided to pick this educational experience to showcase? Because developing something like this is not exactly a joke. I mean, there is a lot of work that goes into it. And for many studios that are very focused on acquiring clients or delivering for them, this might be seen as a overhead. So how do you approach this and creating this specific app?
Yep, that's a great question. The way that we see it is that for us to be able to provide the world-class services, we need to be experts in the space. And to be experts in the space, we need to be experts before we actually provide these services to clients. So we've always had from day one a strong emphasis in when new technologies come along to be experts as soon as possible and to build things and to be able to show that we are experts in this field, to then be able to provide that as a service to our clients. So in the last 6 to 8 months, maybe 6 months, there have been two huge changes in our industry, which have come about with the launch of the Quest 3, which has opened up what we are calling, I think Meta is also calling, room scale mixed reality. Until now, mixed reality was very limited to a standalone experience. We had some enterprise use cases that were more 2D based, but Meta opened the door to a new type of experiences, which is fully room scale mixed reality, that applications understand your environment, applications understand objects, they understand your space, and you can really use that as a fully moving around experience in mixed reality, which is very different to room scale mixed reality in VR, which is really just about taking a few steps in certain directions. It's more about just having a slight move around. This really takes it to the next level as your space is the actual gameplay area. So with that in mind, we thought it was very important to start start innovating that space and being able to really thrive and be experts in room scale mixed reality before that actually started, with this new technology. And the same thing happened to us with the Apple Vision Pro, which launched in February. And when that launched, we said we need to build an app in ASAP. We need to have an app published in the next 6 weeks. And that's how we built kind of in viewer around that. And the domains of these applications is that we feel that education, we and many other people in the space feel that education is one of the most high impact use cases that we'll be seeing in the next few years, and we really wanted to be experts in that space. And we developed what we think, the way that we're thinking of education is a spectrum between games that make you learn and tools for educators in the classroom. So we tried to cover as much of that spectrum with these two different applications. Newton's Room, a video game that teaches you physics in your room, and in Viewer, we're thinking about it as a Wikipedia, a spatial Wikipedia that will allow students and educators to be able to interact with interactive experiences, which are simulation-based. So it's not just a 3D model. It's depending on your input, you kind of see a different reality in that simulation. So that's kind of how those two projects are going along. In parallel, we're working on our main enterprise clients. So yeah, we're kind of balancing that as more of business development and actual work.
I'm also actually quite interested because developing those, I mean, especially in the case of Newton's Room, it's kind of deep. It's kind of like a deep experience. There is a lot of layers to it. So I wouldn't say it's just, I mean, to learn, you could have built just a demo, right? While instead in that case, it is more of a small package. It's a small, but it's a nice package. It's complete. So it wouldn't say it's something that you put up patched. Do you use those as showcase for clients, or it's really just the learning that you actually get out of it?
Yeah, so I would say it's both. The learnings for sure. We've documented all those learnings on the blog that you mentioned. We have everything that we learned during that process, we have documented. We also feel it's a very strong signal receiver of the industry. With us launching this, we've had the chance to talk with educators, we've talked to potential clients, and really see how there has been a big lack, or there currently is a big lack in high quality mixed reality experiences for education. So we're seeing that as a huge opportunity as well. And it kind of helps us put up these signals to really understand where the space is at the moment. But yeah, it's a full project. I wouldn't call it production ready. It's on App Lab. There are things that we want to continue to work on, and we're using kind of inputs from the community and ideas, and it opens up conversations with big businesses and big companies, and we're using that information to see if we want to continue that project, to see where we can take it to the next level.
Yeah, and absolutely. I want to also now take the opportunity, maybe, and now we are going to start discussing about the design process, the development process. And before that, because you actually brought up a very good point, let me just share one thing very quick. So I absolutely recommend to go, and check the blog from the team, because it's very well done, and the site can be reached. Oh, here we go. That was. Yeah. So it is very comprehensive, and I really love the detailed best practice mixed reality design, and in-depth guide. This is a very good one. So there is a lot of good stuff. So please go ahead. And by the way, since we are here talking about blogs, we also have our own live blogs on the ShapesXR website. That is, again, also, it tackles very, very specific questions, like how your head is the camera, how do you choose the right size for your UI. Again, I think that there is a lot of content online. Everybody asks me very often, oh, but how do I learn? How do I get started? Well, the way you get started is checking there. So some people are asking, what is the link of that blog? So for the Treeview, you can just go on the Treeview website, and then in there is a blog section. I can go back so that people can see it. Can I share the link? It is a very good point. Let me try. Maybe I can. Let me see.
Maybe I can get it here also.
I think I could. I hope that this is going to be visible. I think it is. Yep. Yeah, that's the one. And this is for Shapes. So you can also go in there. Kate, I think you should be able to get it now. Let us know. But it should be this one. Right. And so again, please.
Maybe like with all of this learning, I think I think it's important also for the community, because it's a pretty small industry, the XR industry, and I think it's apart from outputting great pieces of software, I think to be able to tell the stories behind how those pieces of software were built, I think provides a lot of insights and value to the whole community. And I think we're kind of figuring, one of the things that we're learning kind of with this new update of changes of design, of paradigms, and Apple has kind of introduced a new way of interacting with their software, is that it changes very often. So being able to kind of share those processes and make sure that as a whole community, we're building same types of interfaces. Mobile and web has decades and decades of matureness of kind of interactions, and XR is kind of still figuring that out. So the more that I think that we can collaborate as an industry, I think the better.
Absolutely, and that's why we are here sharing all this knowledge, right? So let's dive into the meat of this conversation, right? So Horacio, why don't you tell us what's the team composition, and how do you structure your workflow? Like, say, from design, development. Why don't you guide us through this?
Perfect. So we're a team of about 15 people, mostly developers, but also a group of designers. And the way that we prefer to develop software is what in software development it's called waterfall methodology. And the waterfall methodology is going phase by phase, from discovery, which we call like the understanding of the domain, understanding why we're building the software, understanding who our users are, really understanding the purpose before actually building. Then we do the design phase, which we start by understanding what the application does. We do some mock-ups, we do some quick prototypes to understand if the core mechanics work. We do the full UI UX design, which is the actual visuals, and then we kind of test that out. And then we go into development. So that goes out into the engineering team to develop. Then we do testing and user testing, and then finally publishing. So it's a very step-by-step process. And in the last maybe last 15 years, there has been a big debate between that type of development and something that's called agile software development, which is a continuous sprints of building, of being like, it's a kind of like a long prototyping phase until you launch the product. The challenge that we have with Agile is that it's very hard to work with clients in Agile, because clients have expectations. We need to have this ready by this date. We have to have an understanding. They have to know what they're going to expect before actually starting the project. So it's very hard to actually guarantee a timeline and a scope by just prototyping until you have a final product. That's why we have a strong emphasis for waterfall. And in this waterfall process, we had a pretty stable and we had a great polished workflow, but we had a specific challenge that we faced with working with Apple Vision Pro. We have been working with Quest for a long time. We work with Magic Leap. We work with HoloLens. We had experience in that space, and we had kind of like a design understanding of how those apps work. Apple Vision Pro came with a new standard of how users interact with their content, and that caught us by surprise. And we were having a long time to actually polish an experience to work properly on that app. And the iteration times were just so long, and that was like a huge bottleneck in the company.
Can you tell us a bit what long
Yes.
means?
Yes.
And by the way, I've had a question from Kate. What is the second method? I think you're comparing waterfall and agile.
Agile would be the other. Yes,
and,
agile.
So just one thing also to talk to people that are listening live. What is your method? Do you use more a waterfall system or do you use more agile? While we get into this, so Horacio, what do you mean as long iteration time?
Yes, maybe just to clear up the methodologies. The two main methodologies are waterfall, which is a step-by-step, each phase proved until you complete the app, and agile, which is a continuous build up, like it could be like a continuous prototyping until you complete the product. The reason why we prefer waterfall is for the types of clients that we work with. We need to set expectations at the start. We need to set a time frame and a scope, and we need to develop that in that time frame. That is super high risk to do in agile. That's why we prefer waterfall. The reason that agile was so popular these last 15 years is that it works great with the startup industry. The startup industry are finding a product as they go, and they need to be able to quickly pivot and iterate as the product is actually being developed. You develop a V1, you test that in the market, you get inputs from the market, then you have to iterate to something else. So it's a constantly changing purpose of the software. But with enterprise work, the purpose is defined at the beginning. We need this for this, and then it's you have a clear understanding of the end state before you start. That when startups, they really actually don't know what they're building, and they're kind of like figuring out as they go. So those are the two main methodologies. We prefer waterfall, and this bottleneck that we discovered was specific to Apple Vision Pro. The way that we were designing for Apple Vision Pro was we use a design tool called Figma, which is a 2D design tool used a lot for websites and for mobile. It's basically like a Photoshop Illustrator, but a better version than that. But it's 2D and it's native 2D, and there's a lot of gaps between what you design there and what you actually get in a 3D space. So we had that tool that was working for us, at least previously, but there was a challenge that we were designing something there. We would implement that in Unity. We would build that to Xcode. We would test that on Apple Vision Pro, and then we would do a round of feedback. And that process was just so slow. Those feedbacks were just like guess, like, well, this should be bigger, that should be smaller. So it was just like so subjective, that feedback, that loop in a team setting was extremely slow. There was multiple stakeholders involved. The dev team was building, the people more leading the product were testing, the designers were involved there. So many different people in this process that it was just like a super slow process that we were finding out with InViewer, which was our first Apple Vision Pro app that we were developing, was this internal project to really understand how to develop for this platform. So that was the main point. And then basically I'm not sure who of us said there must be a better way that we can do this, because we were having a huge pain point. And that's kind of when we had previously touched a bit ShapesXR a few years ago. But that time, this is when we actually said, okay, let's see if this tool can really help us with this pain point that we have.
And I think this sounds like the best time to show a little video of how that process looked like, and also how InViewer actually looks like. So let's play this 45 seconds video to give an impression to the people listening.
Sure. This is on Apple Vision Pro, just to reference on the actual software. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me. This is the ShapesXR prototyping process. And this is multiplayer feature, which is great also. So this is pretty a key feature for us to be able to have sessions here and actually design in group.
That's it. And I mean, actually, we can maybe, let's unmute you. I think you're muted.
Yes, yeah. Now we're good.
I think that what we can do, maybe you can tell us a little bit how those initial Figma, let's say, board look like. And then what we can do is that we can just hop in Shapes so that we can actually show in real time how that process actually looks like when you are in Shapes in a 3D environment in mixed reality.
Yes, I think that's great. Here's our Figma. So I'm assuming any designer on the team kind of knows this tool. And basically, this is in the design process of waterfall. Let me just show real quick. This is a quick diagram of what waterfall looks like. You start with the discovery phase, then once that's finished, you go into the UI UX, the design phase. That's finished, development, testing, deployment. It's a very step-by-step process, which is very organized. For us, it works great. I know it's a big debate, and if there's any agile fans, we might have a discussion here. But for us, this has worked great. So let's kind of go into what is the UI UX design process, which is actually designing the product.
And by the way, I'm still waiting for people to tell us agile or waterfall. What's your approach? But please, Horacio, go ahead.
Perfect. So the outcome, our previous outcome of the UI UX phase was these diagrams. So here you can actually see how the app works. You can understand that there's a main menu where you have a different selection of different simulations. You can select a simulation and kind of interact with that. It doesn't go too much into detail, but it explains how the software works in a few screens. This is after several iterations. And just as a reference, this is our initial ideas when we were actually starting to explore the designs were more along this. We were thinking about a full-scale experience. We were thinking about like a carousel movement system between the different simulations. And when we actually created this in Apple Vision Pro, it was a disaster. So it doesn't align with Apple Vision Pro's no movement paradigm, which is a staying still experience. Quest is much more moving around, getting up, moving around with the experience. Apple Vision Pro does not want you to move and does not want you to look around too much. So that's also another insight that we had. That's under official documentation. Design documentation, but when you actually test that out, you can actually understand why. So we were playing around with these different viewports. There was this other viewport where we had the context, which was here in the middle. This is a simulation for human gestation, and on the left side we had the details. And this was also a problem because Apple Vision Pro doesn't want you to move your head around too much. They want everything to be in your viewport. They say that on their documentation, and it actually feels weird to be looking to your left to interact with this, looking to your right to interact with this. So all of these feedbacks we were getting when we actually coded and programmed all of the system. And doing changes in development is extremely slow because you have to recode how everything works. It's a very slow implementation process. You have to re-implement the front end all again. So we were having a bunch of challenges to be able to introduce speed into this iteration of how we actually wanted to test it out. So this was the challenge that we had, that we started with a vision. It didn't work once we implemented it, and we started to pivot and iterate. That process...
By the way,
go ahead.
Because I just see people jumping in, and it's like, wow, hard to believe that they don't want you to move around, to move and look around. I wonder, Matthew, if this is a bit of sarcasm or you really mean it. Can you please elaborate?
Yeah, no, they really mean it. If you go to their design documentation, it's worth a read for sure. So every platform, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, Magic Leap, have their design guidelines. So how they expect and suggest you to design the app. And Apple clearly states, we want everything to be in the viewport. So everything that's happening in the application should be in front of the user. They kind of talk about the distance of usage, and they don't want you to be looking left, looking right in the same application. They want the point of focus to be all inside of your field of view in usage. So that it's in their design documentation, and it feels right. So when you actually, this application that we are trying to in 2D explain that this is a huge thing on your left, this is in the center, and this is to the right. It doesn't feel, in Quest it feels better. to be able to like, I'm interacting here and I'm doing here, kind of like that, like it's a multi-module system. But Apple suggests, and what feels better is to have everything in one point of view. So everything in like Gabriele's video, like everything like a system that's all interactive in one same point of focus.
Yeah, indeed. And that has to do a lot with the volume system, right, that they use.
Yeah.
That is
correct.
Because we have, indeed, there are panels, there are volumes, and then there are the spaces, right? That
Correct.
is fully immersive. And by the way, sorry, Russ, I just want to say, I just have a hard time every time I see these Figma images when there is this room in the background and then the different digital content. I always have a hard time understanding how can people still kind of like understand and communicate something like this. And honestly, even on Quest, because now I understand, but if you tell me, okay, but how far is that windmill? Is that like behind, like if the woman is, the gestation is in focus and the others are faded at the side, or it is very hard to understand. And I think that's why going in Shapes, I think we're going to make that much clearer. I also have a questions, and then we can go maybe in Shapes to give an impression. There is, no, it's not this one, it was this one. Awesome. What tools did you use? Did you use any Apple's tools like Reality Composer Pro and its Material X node-based shader graph?
So we built all in Unity. So because this application runs on Apple Vision Pro, on Quest, and on Pico. So we use Unity to kind of build for all three platforms. And the challenge, more than the implementation is pretty straightforward to do on all three platforms. It's creating an app that conceptually feels correct on all three platforms. We're kind of at a weird stage in maturity because every platform is kind of going in their design style. So it's trying to like cater to all platforms. Something that we also feel that's going on with so Quest thrives, I think, in room scale, and this is not necessarily a room scale experience. So our other project, which is called a public project, which is called Newton's Room. Here's a few videos. This is a more of a native full room scale experience. We actually expect it to walk around, and it feels great here. So this would not work in Apple Vision Pro, just as kind of the design paradigm. So Apple Vision Pro is also very 2D focused. So for all of this, for us, was a discovery phase. So we were building this the first weeks that Apple Vision Pro came out, and doing a very thorough learning process for us. So it's and since then, we've already started working with some clients on Apple Vision Pro products. And all of the knowledge that we have in exploring and tinkering ourselves allows us to then translate that value to client work. So it's very important for us, all of this process.
And I do have a question from Federico. I think that links very well. Ciao, Federico. Is it possible to prototype Vision Pro and Quest 3 concept with ShapesXR in the same project, even though UIs differ? And then I think this is a great bridge to actually wear the headset. But please, you can start.
So yes, ShapesXR. I think let's do that for that when we jump into Shapes, and we can go over all the features. I just want to reemphasize what Gabriele mentions of the gap of communication in this photo. So this composition is telling a story, but that story is estimated with just one image. And as a software developer, you receive this image and you have to implement this, right? So this is the input for a developer, a software coder, an engineer to bring this to life in Unity. And there's so much information here that's not explicit. What distance is this? What grade of transparency is this? How is the user expected to rotate this carousel, for example? And then even in the final design, there's a few, even here, for example, there's a few, what size is this in this space? There's so much gap of knowledge. And that was another challenge that we had, which is that once we code, we do a first implementation based on what a software developer interprets in this image of how this is supposed to look in Unity. There's still a bunch of gaps in terms of that knowledge. So basically what we realize is that from this to Unity implementation, there's a huge gap of communication, which causes much more iteration processes once that's in Unity to polish that up in Unity. And what we learned is that by introducing ShapesXR as the middle point between this Figma and the Unity implementation, we can cover all of those knowledge gaps at the design level, so that once software development actually starts, so once we go into this phase, everything is clear of the expectations of the final product. It's look and feel, how it looks, how it works, the sizes, how it spawns in your space, etc. So that's just to wrap up the concept of this gap, this handover, was where we were having a bunch of challenges, especially at the initial parts of the development cycle.
I think you also touched while I'm gonna start wearing the headset, but you mentioned indeed about handover to the developers, and
Yes.
again, need to understand, and there is also very often a lot of improvisation and like their own understanding of this. Developer does it indeed due to that lack of understanding. So let me just get things done.
Do you want me to join also, Gabriele, or?
Yeah. Let's do that. So let me just start the casting as well. Let me get this here, and let me start casting everybody, and cast computer next. We should be doing. Let's mute ourselves
Here?
in Shapes, Horacio. No, in Shapes.
Okay. Yep.
And oops. Here we go. Let me just give me a second to cast. I have it.
Yep. Make sure to put the pass-through feature. I think that's a great for this use case.
Absolutely. Let me present share screen. Let's make sure yep, here we go.
I'm not sure if I lost Gabriele. Yes, and the import feature, Kate, I'm not sure if you guys can hear me, but the import feature is a key feature. So the idea is that it's done once here, and then all of those assets are automatically imported into Unity, which is great also. Awesome. Okay, I'm solo now. So maybe we can go over while we're waiting on Gabriele on the process of from Shapes to Unity, which I think that's one of the key features here. Not only a tool to prototype, but a tool that can be used as what we call the source of truth. So when a software developer builds, starts programming, what is the actual expectations of the final output of that code? I took over, Gabriel, on the.
Thank you very much. I think that my internet collapsed. Let's give it another quick try because I think it should work.
Yep. If not, we're kind of going over. There's a few people with questions. There's a few people with questions on the process of migrating from Figma to from ShapesXR to Unity. And I want to clarify, Figma is a great tool and it's still part of our core work process. So our processes, it's great, it's fast, it's iterate, it's for what now we're using it for initial concepting and for 2D interfaces. Where we see ShapesXR is the middle point between Figma and Unity. That's kind of the way that we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Let me jump in here.
Now I am getting this as big as possible. Okay, I think it works. Here we are. So apologies for the little hiccup, but now here we are. And hello, Horacio.
Ciao, Gabriele, come va?
Ciao, bene. Welcome in my room.
There we go. Cool, I am in my room here. I want to clarify a few things. This looks like a very simple UI, which it is, but the process that it took to get to this simple UI was long. I think that's kind of the behind the scenes of development, is that there's certain things that are much more complex than they look. And to get to this super simple user interface, we did dozens of different processes. We've iterated different systems to be able to get this to feel right. And I encourage anyone with an Apple Vision Pro, ideally, if not, to test this out, this user interface, because it was the details, like making sure it feels correct with your eyes. But Apple Vision Pro also has the possibility of using your fingers to interact also. So we are kind of exploring that feature as well. Yeah, so it's a very creative process and iterative process, and I think what Shapes allowed us to do is to do that process remotely. So Gabriele is in Amsterdam, I'm in Montevideo. Our teams are based in, we have people all around Latin America, fully remote, and having a tool that we can collaborate like this on the design has really been, I think, has been a key feature.
So maybe why don't you guide us a bit some of the ideas, some of the things that you have tested to
Yeah,
come up with
yeah.
this design?
Yep. So some of the learnings during the process, that what we initially thought of was a full scale experience, kind of like Quest 3
Hmm.
experiences, which work great. That on Apple Vision Pro did not work. We were also thinking about having more hand gesture movements.
So, for
Yeah,
example, having this in the middle of my room,
yeah,
for some people would be able
exactly.
to see it.
And also, Gabriele, like the three states, like not only centralizing everything in one panel.
Mhm.
I think Quest is also really good at being able to have like multiple points of focus. So you're doing something here, you're doing something there. I think that works well on Quest. On Apple Vision Pro, everything is expected to be inside of your field of view. So that was another big change. Inputs, also kind of the whole tap and click. People are expecting to see some buttons for next and right. We also have the movement of scroll, being able to scroll as well, but having both was important. So yeah, there was a lot of process and iterations on this super simple user experience, user interface. How we got here was, I'm not saying it was month project, but it was a learning curve when we were actually tinkering and building interfaces for Apple Vision Pro. And final comment, there's so little Apple Vision Pro apps on the App Store, and most of them are actually 2D apps. So there's the iPad apps, which are most of them. Then there are some native Apple Vision Pro apps, but those are still 2D apps. So there's very little native 3D user interfaces, which was another point, that we didn't really have too many things to base off of. Like in VR, everyone knows how it works. Everyone knows teleport. Everyone knows how to interact with inputs. Apple Vision Pro literally is just a few months old. So that was another thing that we were really exploring, a new space.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe just to give an impression, so what you have, these, I imagine, these are all, let's say, Figma boards, right? Am I
Yes.
correct?
This comes from Figma, and then this goes into Unity also. So this is like a bridge that allows us to import also. And all of these buttons also have, it's not just 2D itself, but they also have properties of transparency. They have properties of the quality of the edges. So it's more than an image. There are some properties that Unity automatically picks up these properties. So that's also pretty great. So like we don't have to guess the transparency in Unity from Figma. We already have it here, which is also a pretty cool,
Yeah, yeah.
a cool feature.
And by the way, for people that here maybe they might not be familiar, let me go. You see, for example, that there is a sync asset option for each one of these. So if you then make a change in Figma, that change is actually live transported in
Yep.
here. So just as a note. And
Yep.
at any moment, another thing is that, just to, again, for people that might not be aware of what Shapes is, you always have the option to import your own models, right? So this could be an environment, this could be others. So let me see if I have, for example, some, where was it? So here we have, for example, like.
Yeah, well, this is a model, so we kind of figured that out also. That at the beginning we had the 2D image in Figma, and then we said, why don't we just use the model to better represent the space and the depth?
So in this case here, I'm just importing two models. So this is a valve, and then I have a top valve. And again, so this is made in two pieces. I can put it up here together, and then we can kind of like start working on it. Okay, how do you see this being open, for example? Then you can say, well, I could see this like this, and then we could start discussing and having a conversation regarding object, items, UI here at scales, because we are now here at, as you will see, at 100% scales, right? But any moment we could kind of like turn ourselves huge or tiny, and then see this with a different perspective. So I can always go back, and here I am at 100% scale. So that's one of the value of being able to shift and start designing spatially, right? So I'm now gonna get this valve and then throw it away.
And also, Gabriele, just to re-emphasize that, I think another key point here is what we were talking about, the handovers. which is when teams in waterfall, one phase has a clear ending and it moves on to a new phase. And each phase has new team members, has new stakeholders, and has new roles that work in that phase. I also want to clarify that for developing XR, it's very hard to do this solo because it's just so many different domains of knowledge. Maybe that's another thing that when we talk about how to get started, I think being able to assemble a team to actually be able to develop mixed reality applications is key, because what you need for coding and engineering is very different than prototyping, and it's even the discovery, being able to understand different domains of like education, of the physics part. So it's so many different domains of expertise that all in group be able to output high quality mixed reality content and experiences. Absolutely. So that's kind of another, and this transition phase, handover phase from one team to the other, I think is important. This tool also, like before we would have it in Figma, screen sharing, just kind of guessing those gaps in knowledge. And this allows us to get together. And this is not coded yet. It's a mock-up, but it's a spatial mock-up. The sizes are aligned to expectations. So we can set the expectations of all the stakeholders that this is the app that we're expecting to be coded into Unity. And this is a source of truth. So when actually someone's going to say, how transparent should this button be? How the fonts and sizes of this is the source of truth. So this is what we expect to go into Unity.
No more disagreement. This is what this is it. And actually, another point, I don't know if you did, but we have some of our clients actually that use this space as part of the documentation, because you can actually embed this space in Notion. You have it as a playable, let's say, viewer, right? So when you can look at it and export it together with all the stage, so that again it's handed over to developers that they can also visit it or export it or explore it just on web. So that is another.
Yep. Actually, I didn't know about that feature, so actually it's a great onboarding. Yeah.
So why don't we go back now that we have given? We see if there are any questions. Let me stop the casting. Here we go. And we are gonna remove this. And we are back. So I hope, guys, that the frames, there were some drop frames. I hope it was a bit better. Apologies. Sometimes, when you're trying to give a live demo in mixed reality while streaming live to 3 different destinations, we have YouTube and LinkedIn. So I think it's we are pushing the limit, but thanks for sticking with us. So indeed, I see we are always open to other questions, but I wanted to actually to learn. One question that we get very often from people is also how hard it was to learn to use shapes. Because I want to get it out of the way, right?
We can tell about our onboarding process. So the first onboard that we did was self-serve. So they have the public app. We tested it out. We downloaded it, tested it out. We were tinkering with that. And basically, everything is kind of self-explanatory. You kind of understand it by itself. It's kind of very self-explanatory. And then something that was really great for us was we were excited. We were kind of tinkering. And then ShapesXR, we talked with our team, and they gave us what some companies call like a white glove onboarding experience, where we actually met up with someone from the ShapesXR team. We had a 1-hour session. Our whole team was there. We were talking about questions. How is this possible? Is that possible? And that 1 hour or 30 minutes, I can't remember, onboarding experience was great for us. We onboarded as a team. We discussed questions. That was great. So that was kind of our second onboarding as a kind of a big team. That was more like a team onboarding. But that was great. And then and we're learning new things. So like this new feature was something that we just learned about. The software is ever evolving. So new stuff come out every day or every month, and we're excited.
Nice. So indeed, and by the way, as a reminder, this is something that is available. If you go on our homepage, right there is like schedule onboarding. So if you with your team, you can pick a time, and then we have our mastering structure to actually guide you and answer questions. So we encourage everybody to actually join any of those. So I have exciting, very cool. I hear from Christian, very good to hear that you're enjoying this. Also, Erika is saying, thanks for the demo. A pleasure, a pleasure. Sorry if it was a little choppy. Matthew is asking a follow-up question. Do you go from Figma to Shape to Unity or another workflow? Is this indeed the order of things?
Yes. Before it was Figma to Unity manual. So we would manually export all of the images and manually reassemble them in Unity. Now Shapes is the tool that we're using between those two tools. So it allows us to iterate, polish in Shapes, and then that's automatically onboarded to Unity, which is great.
And by the way, for who doesn't know, there is directly a plugin for Unity, so you can just type the space code, and then in there you get all the space, everything in there. So it's not like any weird. So I also wanted to ask. It seems that you had so many, let's say, problems with Vision Pro, right? In a way, how was that different on Vision Pro from Quest?
Yeah, I think what the main difference, I'm not, so yes, there were problems, but I think it's about a maturity of a platform. Quest has been working on what's available now on Quest 3 has been in the makings for multiple years. So I would say like since the first CV1 version. So it's a very mature product, and there's been a continuity to where we are now. So that we've been working on this for 8 years. So basically the same time, that almost the same, since kind of this whole generation of mixed reality of XR, and it's been a process to get here. Apple Vision Pro was basically working in the dark, and they launched this new tool, and it's like, okay, start building things, basically to the developer community, and that it was more than problems. It was just like a new paradigm.
Familiarity.
Familiarity, new paradigm, new tools also. So they have the SDK for Unity is good, but it's new. There's very little examples of at least the 3D side, and people are really figuring this out as we go. So I think it's been, we being part of the developer community are kind of exploring these tools as we go along.
Understand. Look, we are kind of like slowly starting to wrap up. We do have some time, no problem actually. If there are questions, please ask, because this is a good moment. But I wouldn't want to leave without another important things that I want to ask, because it's something that people do not do or dig into very often, and that is the user testing.
Right.
So let's say that we have scoped the project, we have done our first design, we have defined everything, we start design, we hand over to development, magic happens. And then you have something, right, that people can start using. So I was part actually of your user testing process for Newton's Room, right? And I was curious, how do you decide what should be tested? Like, how do you recruit participants? How do you collect feedback, analyze them? Can you maybe guide us a little bit through this very, very important step that very few people talk about?
100. Very few people talk about, and actually very few people do also. So I think that's the insight. I think the biggest risk when developing this, is especially true on consumer apps. So apps that are on, like, just as a user, you download the app and use it without more context. So it's for consumer facing. I think the biggest risk when developing consumer apps is that you and your team have been using this application for months. You understand how it works. You understand what it's supposed to do, and you test it. Expect as the builder of what you're actually testing. And what people don't realize is that all of those assumptions that you've been building up through months of participating in the project are obvious to you, but if you give it to someone else, it is completely not obvious. So people really, they expect people to use it as if one uses it. And I think that's kind of the biggest challenge. And with user testing, what we noticed was that having 5 people test software covers 95 of the issues, the usability issues. So what we did was phases of 5 testers every time that we had a new big update, that they would test the app. We'll dive into the details there, and then we would look at them using the app, and we would be pulling out our hair saying they didn't realize this, they're having troubles here, which we thought was obvious. And it brings to light all of the main usability challenges of the app. And that's really on the testing side. So if you have a software that technically works, it's doing what it's supposed to do, but when you're actually testing, you realize these gaps that need to be filled to really have a great experience using that application. And Gabriele, you were one of the testers, which we're very appreciative. And I think one of the learnings of us there is that people's time is very valuable, and expecting people just to give you their time just because you're building something cool is I think it's not enough. And I think it's the way that we approach it is, what can we give back to this person that's going to give 1 hour of time to us? That's really, I think, the mindset that we approached it. If we would just, hey, test our app, like no one really cares about it. So the basic human nature is that really people ever just think it's not, unless you have a community, which in our case we really don't, since we're focused mainly on enterprise, that you can kind of tap into, that you've been building and giving value to over months and years. We were kind of new in the space. So what we used was a technique, which was, let's give back. And what we wanted to give back is content. And we basically purchased a bunch of Meta Store gift cards. And the cash doesn't feel nice because it's like you're buying someone's time. So we didn't want that feeling. We wanted to give a nice gift, and what better that an XR user give them XR content of their preference. So we gave everyone $50 gift card. They could buy any of the games that they wanted. It felt more like an exchange of favors. And that really helped us. So when we went with that approach of how can we add value, that was when we had a lineup. So we had more testers than we actually could handle. So that's how we solved it.
There are a couple of important things you said. So first of all is indeed, of course, give something back. You also said, though, that you're not looking at hundreds of dozens.
No.
It's 5. Right?
5.
That is a very important thing, right? So how do you approach it? Even because, and this is the other thing that you brought up, is you get 5, but as I understand that, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not about do they like the app, do they not like the app, how is this interaction feel? No, it's like, let's identify something that it's core usability issue, right?
Correct.
So would people not be able to complete a core task that is in the app, like pick a 3D model, launch a ball, start the experience, or something along those lines, right? And those are the ones that are tackled first. And by the way, one thing is, you did that by reminding people, hey, record a video, turn the microphone on, and talk aloud while you perform the various actions. Because that is also very important, because a written thing would totally not work, because people will give you all sorts of different feedback and you will need to guess. One instead, seeing the user trying to do something, that is the best way of actually understanding.
100%. And everyone has their own solution. So like, this should be like this, should be that. That's not what you should be listening to. You should be identifying where the core pain points are. I think that's the highest value. The user testing that we did was based on 3 different scenario or process steps. First, we wanted to know who is this person? Is he an XR user? Is he in the space? Is he just like how old? So the demographics, and really understand where is he coming from. We're creating an educational physics app. How much is this a physics professor? Is it like someone who just did it in high school? So it's first understanding who the person is, which we did a survey, then a full testing of the app. This was video recorded. This was mic enabled, and what we would ask for is speak your mind. So tell us what you're doing. I'm doing this. This is why I don't think this is good. And people, talk about. It's very fun to kind of see that. It's like their ideas and hey, this is cool. No, I don't really understand this. But it's speaking their mind in action. So it's like the first impressions and all that. We would watch those videos, take notes, and get action items of these are his main pain points. What is our hypothesis, being the developers, of how we can fix those? How we would fix them on that. And then a final one, which is just people sometimes also like take some time to think about it, and then they kind of give a post survey. So it's like, after you did this, like, what are your thoughts here, your feedbacks, your ideas? And that was kind of the outcome that we wanted. And that's a lot of effort and work from the person. So it's really that's what's like, how can you expect someone to do all of that for you? And it's that interchange of value was how can, like, okay, thank you. Here's all of these games that you can buy. Like, buy these 5 games with this. Thank you for your time. And that's kind of the approach that we took.
So we are going towards the end, and I do have a quick questions. Would you do user testing in ShapesXR first? Because, by the way, also Kate is asking, I use ShapesXR demo for testing or Unity version. What was tested was the playable APK, right? Not the ShapesXR.
Correct.
So maybe a question what Kate was asking, Kirsten, sorry. Would you use user testing for ShapesXR?
That's a good question. This project, which is called Newton's Room, is a game, and testing game mechanics is more complex than testing more enterprise applications. So it would depend on the use case, and then also, so that is final user testing. And before user testing, there's a lot of internal testing also. So I think that I feel that ShapesXR is better for internal testing. Being a team, if you work in a team, every team member's opinion is valuable, and there's a lot of internal testing that you can be done. But we're all XR developers, and we have we already know a lot of things that we need to get other people's opinion on. We also have a concept which is design reviews. So when we're actually designers test the actual build. So it's a lot of internal testing. And I would say there, ShapesXR works great, and especially for taking decisions early on. For final testing, which is user end testing, that's really on the final product. We're building digital products here. And once the product is developed, there is when you actually output the actual software.
Absolutely, and I think that Shapes is a more of a communication tool at the beginning, where you can present. So it also depends what is user testing, right? I mean, if you test in the final interactions, the final app, then no, you can have a mock-up though in Shapes where you show, okay, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. So it becomes really a communication tool that could be used internally, but we do have also seen many people actually pitching project to clients in Shapes. Right, because they don't have the time, because the project hasn't been granted yet, and as a studio that is maybe indeed 12, 15, 20 people, you cannot spend resources to build a prototype just for a client that you don't know if it's going to pay. But what they've done is that their designers that went in Shapes, start prototyping, designing, they had something spatial that could be presented, and of course the client was like, what is this? Yeah, we build a prototype for you. So that is, I think, any case, I wouldn't call that user testing, right? I wouldn't call it like that. But in terms of presenting something to someone that has a chance to understand how this works, that's certainly qualified. So then answering the last couple questions would be nice. Is it possible to get heat maps or analytics stats from user testing in ShapesXR? So no, the answer is not. We don't have that specifically. So no, but who knows? Who knows? Then is Horacio on Twitter, X? Can we follow him? I already follow ShapesXR. Of course, I think Horacio is totally on Twitter, right?
Yeah, I'm totally on LinkedIn actually, but I am on Twitter also, but it's more like a secondary. It's Horacio will be H. I think it's H Torrendel. I'll type it here on the chat, but I think I don't have permission to type. Aurelia, maybe you can get that one. Okay, one other comment, Gabriel, if I could mention kind of on these ideas. One extra challenge with mixed reality apps that previously I think VR did not have was the uncertainty and unknowns in the environments that the users use this application in. I think that's a specific challenge that people underestimate, that my space, it might work fine in my space, but it's someone that is in a smaller place or larger space, the application might not work. And that has been one of our biggest challenges in this user testing, that not only usability, but people's different environments would have a complete different gameplay experience. So that's another challenge. So yeah, we're in a new space. So I think VR has had almost a decade of maturing into where we are now. Mixed reality, I feel that we have just kind of started the surface. So I think I kind of see it as kind of the next platform. I'm not sure platform is this case, but the next paradigm of user applications. It's interacting in your environment, in your space, as kind of the primary, gameplay area or use or app area.
And what a better way than start designing, ideating, and prototyping in the space itself, right? Because otherwise, the other option is, again, you have a background image of your living room.
Not even yours, just like a stock living room.
or AI generated.
Yeah, also.
That's also what's going to happen. So I think that let's go back to reality when you're designing for mixed reality. Put on the headset and start prototyping, because I think really that's the way to go. I have shared your X on your X account on the chat, but I welcome everybody to follow us on ShapesXR as well as Horacio, because there is a lot of project coming out, and do not forget to, first of all, try InViewer is available on Quest and on Vision Pro. Do not forget to try Newton's Room, of course, because it's available on App Lab, and it's a very, very nice mixed reality experience that really takes advantage of room scales, and I really mean it. And last but not least, don't forget to download ShapesXR to start designing and prototyping in mixed reality for creating this new generation of content, right? So, Horacio, I wanted to thank you. Oh, wait, people are asking for links.
Links, yeah. I'm more, Gabriel, I'm more on LinkedIn. So X I don't use that much. So I think that would be my primary internet watering hole.
Yeah. So let's do this. You guys connect also with Horacio so that you can get the links for the various apps, and I'm pretty sure that everybody will have plenty of things to do during the weekend to explore and learn. So Horacio, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Gabriel, for the invite. Have a good one.
Bye bye, and have a great day, everybody.